The harbor at night is a place of contradictions. Sodium lamps burn orange halos into the slick water, turning every ripple into molten metal. Beneath the glow, pilings groan with barnacle crust, and ropes sag under the weight of salt and algae. At the surface, the scene seems quiet, even dull, an industrial afterthought. But just below, the ocean is alive with scent. Invisible to us, it is written into the currents in ribbons of chemical information. Blood, oil, fish guts, diesel, and the faint tang of plastic. To a human, it might only register as a foul brine, but to a tiger shark drifting in from the dark, it is a map as clear as a runway at night. The tiger shark, Galiocerdo cuvier, moves like a shadow painted on water. Its stripes, faint vertical bars that inspired its name, blur against the half-light, a natural camouflage perfected for slipping between reef, open ocean, and shoreline. But the real invisibility trick is not visual at all. The shark glides with barely a whisper of turbulence, every fin angled to silence the wake, every muscular undulation smoothed to a glide. It is not a hunter in pursuit tonight, but a scavenger following a trail we have laid down. What makes this predator so adaptable is not merely its bulk, nor its famously broad diet, but the sensory architecture stitched into its head. Along the snout, twin nostrils open into folds of tissue lined with olfactory neurons, each one designed to detect parts per billion of amino acids, the scent molecules of life. Unlike our own nostrils, which merge into a single airway, a shark's nares remain independent. That separation grants stereo smelling. Each side detects strength and timing differences in the plume of odor, allowing the shark to cast side to side in the current until the signals converge. In effect, it triangulates on the source as precisely as a bat echolocating in the dark. Tonight, the plume is human-made, the waste stream from a trawler cleaning its catch, a slurry of scales, heads, and entrails sluicing into the tide. To a tiger shark, there is no distinction between natural carrion and a bucket of discarded bycatch. Both are part of the same ecological signal, an opportunity. Yet our waste plumes are not like the remains of a single dying turtle or the scattered oils of a decomposing whale. They are concentrated, predictable, and often repeated in the same places day after day. In many tropical harbors, a shark can follow the clock as well as the current. By evening, the fish cleaning stations drip a steady trickle of calories into the shallows. By midnight, tourist boats chum the surf breaks with frozen sardines to guarantee sightings. Over time, these artificial subsidies have carved invisible roads across the sea, corridors of expectation etched into the shark's memory. Close to the trawler, another layer of sensory equipment switches on. Along the snout and jawline, small black dots form patterns that look like freckles. These are the ampullae of Lorenzini, jelly-filled canals that lead to electroreceptors capable of detecting microvolt fields. The firing muscle of a single fish, the twitch of a buried flounder under sand, or even the beating of a human heart in the surf, all radiate faint electrical currents. As the tiger shark closes the last meters, smell gives way to electricity, guiding its strike. But near harbors, that strike may not fall on fish at all. It might be drawn toward our discarded hooks, plastic bags, or half-sunk refuse. Scientists have debated for decades whether shark provisioning, the regular feeding of sharks by dive tourism operators, reshapes natural behavior. Tagging studies in places like the Bahamas and French Polynesia reveal that tiger sharks visiting provisioning sites often linger longer than they would otherwise. Instead of roaming over hundreds of kilometers, some become semi-residents, tethered to the expectation of food. For divers, this predictability is a business model. For sharks, it may mean risk. Concentrated animals become easier to target for illegal fishing, and their altered movement patterns can bring them into tighter overlap with swimmers or fishermen. What appears to be a controlled attraction site may in reality rewire the commuting map of a predator that evolved to spread its risk thin across vast seascapes. One uncomfortable truth that emerges from necropsies is that following our waste streams has consequences far beyond altered movement. Inside the stomachs of stranded tiger sharks, researchers often find an inventory of the Anthropocene. license plates, trash bags, wine bottles, segments of tires, entire birds wrapped in fishing line. The shark is not indiscriminate because it is foolish, but because the strategy of swallowing first and digesting later worked for millions of years. Sea turtles with shells, dolphins with bones, dugongs with dense ribs, all could be reduced in the grinding spiral of a shark's gut. But the same enzymes that break down cartilage cannot process polyethylene. A stomach clogged with plastic has no evolutionary precedent, and the shark pays the cost. In one study, nearly half of examined tiger sharks carried debris. Some survived, others did not. It is easy to imagine that this is a coastal problem alone, yet the truth is more expansive. Satellite tagging has shown that tiger sharks commute across entire basins with remarkable precision. They appear to navigate using the Earth's magnetic field, imprinting routes that lead them back to the same islands, the same reefs, and now, increasingly, the same human dumping grounds. The shark that swam through a harbor in Hawaii may weeks later cruise along an atoll in the Central Pacific, only to circle back months after to the same cleaning station where fishermen hose decks into the tide. To them, the ocean is not featureless. It is a magnetic map scored with reliable beacons of scent and memory. For coastal communities, the sight of a tiger shark sliding into the harbor mouth can trigger both awe and unease. Here is an apex predator, a 4-meter torpedo built on 60 million years of refinement, drawn into human space not by malice but by the signal we broadcast in waste. Surfers in Reunion Island have felt the sharp end of this overlap, where shark attacks spiked alongside coastal runoff and fish processing. Conservationists argue that the problem is not the sharks themselves, but the systems we create. Corridors of predictable subsidy that collapse the distance between predator and people. Yet even in these uneasy zones, the tiger shark plays a role larger than fear. It is a recycler, a sweeper of carcasses, a regulator of turtle and seal populations, and in some ecosystems, an agent of habitat balance. When it follows a plume into the harbor, it is only extending the ancient logic of scavenging into a world we have altered beyond recognition. The shark does not know that the trail ends in a trawler instead of a whale. To its nose, both smell like the promise of survival. And so the scene closes much as it began. The sodium lights still shimmer on the slick harbor water, but somewhere below a tiger shark turns back into the night. Its belly is heavier, its senses still alive with the echo of currents and voltages. Perhaps tomorrow it will ride the same plume to the same dock. Perhaps it will range outward, guided by a compass we barely understand, across hundreds of kilometers of open sea. But wherever it goes, it will carry the imprint of what we leave behind, bait lines and garbage trails stitched into the seascape, invisible to us, but clear as a highway to them. Our coastlines no longer smell only of salt and tide. To a tiger shark, they smell like a buffet line built from our discards. And in following those lines, the shark reminds us of an uncomfortable truth. We have turned the ocean into an extension of our waste, and the scavengers of the sea are learning to follow the routes we lay down. In the open water, where no rock or coral interrupts the endless blue, survival is a game of vanishing. To the human eye, the midwater column appears empty, a void of light and silence stretching in every direction. But this is an illusion. Suspended in that emptiness hangs a chrome blade, the barracuda. It does not swim with the languid sweep of a tuna, nor the soaring arcs of a dolphin. It hovers nearly still, suspended by the smallest adjustments of a crescent tail. One beat, and the predator has crossed 3 body lengths, a silver streak splitting the ocean like a sword drawn from its scabbard. The great barracuda, Sphaerina barracuda, has earned its reputation as the ghost of the shallows and the terror of the reefs. Long, torpedo-shaped, with a head that tapers to a brutal jaw lined by triangular teeth, it looks less like a fish and more like a weapon forged by the sea itself. Yet what makes it so successful is not just speed or power, but invisibility. Where a reef shark must blend with shadows and sand, and a tuna must rely on school coordination, the barracuda simply erases its outline. The trick lies in its skin. Each scale is layered with microscopic guanine crystals, arranged like mirrors. Instead of reflecting one sharp image, these crystals scatter light in ways that mimic the surrounding water. To our eyes, it appears metallic, almost polished. But to the smaller fish it hunts, that polish is a deception. In blue water, where light diffuses evenly from above and the horizon is featureless, mirrored camouflage works better than stripes, spots, or countershading. The barracuda is a moving absence, its edges blurred into the medium itself. Even predators that specialize in contrast detection struggle to fix its outline. For a sardine or mullet, the ambush does not appear until it is already too late. When the strike comes, it is as sudden as lightning. Most predatory fish initiate pursuit by flaring fins or swinging their bodies into a wide arc, but the barracuda relies on a different script. Its attack begins with the head, yawing just enough to angle the snout toward its target. This subtle pivot sets up the body for what follows, a pulse of thrust generated by an explosive flick of the tail. Unlike many hunters that accelerate gradually, the barracuda delivers a single violent contraction of muscle, a torque that propels it forward at a velocity most prey cannot match. Studies of high-speed footage show that the predator's acceleration outpaces the turn rates of nearly all reef fish it hunts. While a mullet may be able to dart sideways with impressive agility, its reaction time lags by milliseconds, just long enough for the barracuda's jaws to close around it. Those jaws are not just cutting tools, they are surgical shears. The teeth interlock like a row of triangular razors, angled slightly inward so that a captured fish cannot easily wriggle free. In larger prey, a single snap often severs chunks of flesh outright, leaving the barracuda to circle back for the remains. This strategy, known as hit and return, conserves energy. Rather than wrestle a struggling victim, the predator inflicts catastrophic damage in the opening bite, then waits as the weakened fish bleeds out. In the blue void of the midwater, blood disperses rapidly, but not before guiding the predator back for its final claim. The evolutionary elegance of this hunting style is tied to biomechanics. Barracudas are built like arrows, with minimal drag and maximum muscle allocation to the caudal peduncle, the narrow region before the tail fin. By concentrating thrust here, they can transform stored energy into explosive forward motion with incredible efficiency. Unlike endurance swimmers such as mackerel or tuna, they are sprinters, capable of bursts that render escape nearly impossible. But bursts come at a cost. The muscles fatigue quickly, and the predator must return to its hovering state, recovering oxygen debt while scanning for the next chance. For divers, encounters with barracudas are both mesmerizing and unsettling. Suspended in the water column, the fish often appear to watch intently, hovering at a distance, their silver flanks catching ambient light. On rare occasions, one will dart closer, jaws slightly parted, before veering away at the last instant. Most of the time, these are bluff displays, curiosity rather than aggression. But the stories that ripple through coastal communities tell of sudden strikes. Jewelry ripped from wrists, cameras smashed by lunges, wounds inflicted by a fish that can accelerate like a bullet. What draws them in these cases is not blood, but reflection. To a barracuda, the glint of a watch face or the strobe of a camera flash can resemble the scales of fleeing prey. Its evolutionary program is tuned to chase flashes of light, the same flashes that sardines or anchovies produce when their schools turn in unison. The ocean is full of these cues, the mirrored flash of a fish flank, the sudden glimmer of sunlight hitting a retreating scale. Divers inadvertently mimic this when wearing metallic gear or firing strobes. The controversy lies in how often such mistakes occur. Documented attacks are rare, far outnumbered by the hours divers spend near these fish without harm. Yet when they do occur, they underline a profound truth. The sensory world of the barracuda is tuned differently than ours, and our reflections are not exempt from its interpretation. In ecological terms, the barracuda is more than a lone hunter. It is a regulator of the reef fringe and the open water corridor. By culling mid-sized fish, it helps shape prey populations, preventing unchecked growth of species that could overwhelm plankton stocks or outcompete juveniles of other reef organisms. Its role extends beyond predation. It is a conduit linking shallow and deep, reef and open sea. When barracudas patrol the edges of mangroves or lagoons, They act as deterrents against herbivorous fish that might overgraze fragile seagrass beds. When they roam offshore, they connect ecosystems by transferring nutrients between zones through the prey they consume. There is irony in their mirror camouflage. A predator designed to vanish in the open blue has become, to us, a symbol of menace, its toothy grin etched into fishing lore, its speed exaggerated into myth. Yet much of the fear arises not from reality, but from misunderstanding. Barracudas are opportunists, not monsters. They do not seek conflict with humans, nor do they confuse us with their prey. The rare accidents are not proof of malice, but of evolutionary programming colliding with the artificial cues we introduce into their world. And still, the metaphor is hard to resist. In the empty ocean, reflections are weapons. The guanine crystals that scatter light across the barracuda's body erase its presence until the moment of strike. A diver's careless jewelry becomes a lure. A bait fish's desperate shimmer becomes a death sentence. The midwater, for all its apparent clarity, is not a void, but a hall of mirrors. Every glint carries meaning, every flash an invitation or a trap. To survive in this theater, the barracuda has become the master of reflection, both in camouflage and in predatory precision. As the predator drifts once more into the blue, it leaves no wake, no ripple, nothing to betray its passage. Only the occasional shimmer of silver betrays the truth, that in the ocean, mirrors are never just for show. They are tools of life and death, as sharp and decisive as the teeth that wait behind them. On the continental shelf, where sunlight fades into a grey-green haze and the water grows cold and heavy with silt, the seafloor is not empty. It looks barren at first, a rolling plain of sand and stone punctuated by sponges, starfish, and the occasional tangle of kelp roots. But watch closely. What seems to be just another rock has a rhythm, a slow rise and fall, as if the seabed itself is breathing. A curious minnow flits past, darting between sand ripples. Then something impossible happens. From the rock, a slender rod extends forward, tipped with a fleshy tassel that wiggles like a worm. The minnow hesitates, drawn by movement in a desert of stillness. It circles once, twice. The lure twitches again. And then the seabed inhales, a sudden collapse of water and prey into a cavernous mouth, leaving behind nothing but sand settling back to silence. This is the monkfish, Lophius piscatorius, master of deception in the North Atlantic. To divers, it is a grotesque spectacle, an enormous head with a mouth wider than its body, studded with teeth angled inward like prison bars. Its fins are less for swimming than for walking, supporting its ambush lifestyle on the bottom. But to prey, it is not grotesque at all. It is invisible, the very floor of the ocean, waiting with patience honed by tens of millions of years of evolution. At the core of its deception lies the Elysium and esker, the modified dorsal spine and fleshy lure that make the monkfish one of nature's original anglers. Unlike active hunters that chase down prey in bursts of speed, monkfish exploit the psychology of their victims. Small fish, crabs and cephalopods are tuned to investigate flickers of movement against stillness. The esker, shaped differently in each population, is tuned to mimic local prey types. Off the European shelf, it resembles a shrimp. In American waters, it more often appears worm-like. This flexibility is not genetic coincidence, but adaptive utility. Evolution has sculpted each population to seduce the species most common in its region. Once the target approaches within striking distance, the true weapon is not the lure, but the vacuum. Monkfish are among the fastest suction feeders in the sea. In less than 1/20th of a second, their buccal cavity expands, creating negative pressure that drags water and prey suspended in it directly into the mouth. High-speed imaging shows the scale of this event. Jaws flare wide, the tongue depresses, and the floor of the mouth drops like a trapdoor, pulling an entire volume of water inward. For the prey, there is no struggle, no escape. One instant it swims free, the next it is inside a chamber lined with backward-facing teeth, funneled inevitably into the digestive system. What makes this strategy remarkable is its efficiency. Swimming after prey consumes enormous amounts of energy, particularly in cold benthic environments where metabolism runs slowly. By luring prey instead of chasing it, the monkfish conserves calories while maximizing intake. The suction strike ensures that not just the target, but also the surrounding water, often carrying plankton or smaller fish, becomes part of the meal. It is an eating style that seems gluttonous, but in fact it is survival refined to perfection. Do as little as possible, but make every opportunity count. Ecologically, monkfish occupy a crucial role as apex ambush predators of the seafloor. They control populations of herring, whiting, and flatfish, preventing any single species from overwhelming the benthic community. In turn, they become prey themselves to larger sharks and seals, but only rarely, for their camouflage and sit-and-wait strategy means they are seldom exposed. In some ways, their existence embodies the paradox of ocean ecology. The ugliest forms often play the most elegant roles. Yet the story of the monkfish is not only about biology, it is also about us and the way our appetites intersect with theirs. For centuries, monkfish were considered trash fish, often thrown back by European trawlers because of their grotesque appearance. But in recent decades, they have been rebranded as poor man's lobster, their firm white flesh celebrated in restaurants. As demand surged, so too did the fisheries. The problem is not that monkfish cannot be caught sustainably, it is how they are caught. Most commercial monkfish are harvested with bottom trawls, vast nets dragged across the seafloor, scooping not just the target species, but everything in their path. These nets flatten benthic habitats, crushing sponges, corals, and invertebrates that form the architecture of the ecosystem. Maps of heavily trawled regions reveal scars etched into the seabed, long furrows where the natural complexity has been erased. What was once a living mosaic of structures becomes a homogenized plain, reducing refuge for countless species. In this way, our pursuit of a fish that perfected stillness has become a force of destruction for the environment it inhabits. Alternatives exist. In some regions, longline gear, rows of baited hooks suspended above the bottom, captures monkfish with far less damage to benthic communities. The method is slower, less efficient, and often more expensive, but it spares the habitat while still meeting demand. Conservationists argue that if we admire the monkfish's evolutionary ingenuity, we should also mirror it in our fisheries, targeted, precise, and restrained, rather than blind, destructive, and indiscriminate. There is irony here, one too sharp to ignore. Evolution built the monkfish as a perfect vacuum, a creature that waits silently and inhales whatever crosses its threshold. Fisheries, in copying only the vacuum effect, seem to have learned the wrong lesson. Instead of selective precision, they mimic the indiscriminate intake, drawing up not just monkfish but corals, rays, skates, and juvenile fish of countless species. The natural predator takes what it needs and no more. The industrial version takes everything and leaves emptiness behind. To truly understand the monkfish, one must stand in awe of its contradictions. It is sedentary, yet deadly efficient. It is grotesque in form, yet elegant in function. It is a solitary ambusher, yet its fate is tied tightly to human economies and ecosystems. Watching one inhale a fish in the blink of an eye is to witness evolution's experiment in minimalism, a predator that does almost nothing, and in doing so, survives brilliantly. But when we drag nets across the seafloor in pursuit of it, we transform that brilliance into fragility. The monkfish may be built to deceive prey with a flick of its lure, but it cannot deceive the scale of our extraction. In the end, the seafloor inhales not only minnows but also the weight of our choices. The ocean reminds us, through this strange predator, of a simple truth. Stillness can be power, patience can be lethal, and sometimes the most terrifying vacuum is not natural, but human-made. The reef at dawn is a mosaic of color, yet one shadow among the corals is more deliberate than the rest. A banded form coils itself into a knot, half disappearing into a crevice, muscles flexing in slow, deliberate waves. The goby inside freezes, gills fanning faster as if it senses the danger too late. In one strike, the slender head of a sea snake thrusts into the hole, jaws barely wide enough to seize the fish, venom flowing before the prey can even thrash. The reef exhales again. The snake unwinds, satisfied, and slips back into the water column where no scales glint and no ripple remains. Sea snakes are paradoxes, reptiles built for land but claimed by the ocean. They are among the most successful colonizers of marine life, numbering more than 60 species across the Indo-Pacific. To the untrained eye, they look fragile, narrow-bodied, ribbon-like, with tiny heads and thin necks. Yet beneath that delicate architecture lies a suite of adaptations that make them not only viable, but formidable in the water. Their very presence is an evolutionary gamble made real, a land-born predator retooled for life at sea, breathing air, yet hunting fish. The first adaptation is in their tongue. Like their terrestrial relatives, sea snakes use a forked tongue to sample chemical particles in the water. But unlike land snakes, they operate in a medium where molecules diffuse differently. Every flick draws in dissolved cues of fish oils, mucus, and even trace amino acids shed by prey. The tongue delivers these signals to the Jacobson's organ, translating them into a chemical map of the surroundings. In clear water, vision supplements the hunt. In turbid lagoons or night dives, chemoreception becomes the primary guide. A fish hidden in a crevice cannot be seen, but its molecular trail betrays it, leading the snake with the precision of an arrow to its hiding place. Buoyancy presents a different challenge. While many fish rely on swim bladders to hover, snakes cannot. Evolution's solution is the extension of a single lung that runs nearly the length of the body. This lung is not just for respiration, it doubles as a ballast tank, finely tuning buoyancy. By adjusting air volume, the snake hovers neutrally among coral branches or sinks effortlessly to scour sandy bottoms. Some species can even use this lung as a reservoir, extending dive times to nearly 2 hours between breaths. Yet, unlike fish, sea snakes must surface eventually. Each rise to the top is a risk, a moment of exposure in the open water column where predators wait. The weapon that ensures survival during those risky forays is venom. Sea snakes wield some of the most potent neurotoxins in the animal kingdom, designed not to terrorize large intruders, but to shut down small prey instantly. A wriggling fish, if left to thrash, could escape or attract rivals. Neurotoxins solve the problem. They block neuromuscular transmission within moments, silencing the prey's body before it can react. This efficiency is critical in a three-dimensional world where a missed opportunity means wasted energy and exposure. And yet, despite their lethality, sea snakes are not aggressors. Most documented bites to people do not come from hunting encounters, but from human interference, especially trawling. When nets haul hundreds of animals to the surface, snakes entangled in mesh thrash and bite in panic. The venom is delivered not from intent to kill humans, but from stress, exhaustion, and the simple reflex of a trapped reptile. Fishermen in Southeast Asia know the risk well. Many bites occur not in the water but on deck, when struggling snakes strike hands that reach too close. This intersection of ecology and economy has created one of the more troubling conservation stories in the Indo-Pacific. In some fisheries, mass deaths of sea snakes are routine, a byproduct of shrimp trawls and gill nets. Unlike dolphins or turtles, sea snakes rarely receive headlines, but their numbers are dwindling silently. In the Gulf of Thailand, bycatch mortality has caused local collapses of once abundant populations. Some species, like the short-nosed sea snake of Australia, are now considered critically endangered, victims not of deliberate hunting, but of incidental capture. The controversy deepens in medicine. Antivenoms exist for some species, but gaps remain. Because sea snake bites are relatively rare compared to cobra or viper incidents, research funding is limited. This leaves communities of fishermen in Indonesia, India, and the Philippines vulnerable. Misreported cases complicate the picture further. Bites are sometimes attributed to aggressive snakes, when in reality they reflect stress-induced accidents during net hauls. The result is a skewed perception. Sea snakes cast as hostile when they are, in truth, reluctant participants in human conflicts. Behavioral studies confirm their non-aggressive nature. Divers who encounter olive sea snakes on reefs often describe curiosity rather than hostility. Males during breeding season may mistake divers for rivals or potential mates, circling and nudging, but actual strikes are exceedingly rare. The venom is expensive to produce, and snakes do not waste it on threats they cannot consume. Their ecological logic is simple. Venom is for prey, not for war. The biology of their breathing underscores their vulnerability. Because they rely on atmospheric oxygen, sea snakes are tethered to the surface in ways fish are not. They can absorb small amounts of oxygen through their skin, an adaptation that supplements but does not replace lung breathing. This partial cutaneous respiration allows them to extend dives, but only in calm, oxygen-rich waters. Pollution, hypoxia, and warming seas may disrupt this balance, shortening dive times and increasing risk. It is a reminder that these predators, though armed with some of the most efficient venoms on Earth, remain delicate in the face of environmental change. What makes them misunderstood killers is not their biology, but our perception. To most coastal villagers, a banded snake in the shallows is a danger to avoid, lumped into the same category as cobras and kraits. Yet the truth is more nuanced. These reptiles represent one of evolution's boldest experiments, land-based vertebrates becoming fully marine while retaining the constraints of air breathing. Their venom is not a threat directed at us, but a finely tuned instrument for dispatching fish. Their occasional conflicts with people arise from overlapping domains, nets, trawlers, and the crowded margins of tropical seas. Step back, and the ecological role becomes clear. Sea snakes regulate populations of reef fishes, particularly gobies, blennies, and eels that hide in cracks and sand burrows. By keeping these prey in check, they prevent overgrazing of algae and preserve balance among coral competitors. They are, in their quiet way, guardians of reef dynamics. Remove them and the equilibrium shifts. Prey expand unchecked, corals suffer, and the system tilts. The image of the reef hole where a goby stopped moving is not just a snapshot of predation. It is a metaphor for the sea snake itself, subtle, often overlooked, but decisive. The goby never knew the predator until it was too late. Likewise, we often fail to notice these reptiles until they vanish from ecosystems altogether. Their decline would not be dramatic, like the collapse of shark populations, but it would be significant. The reef, stripped of one of its air-breathing regulators, would change in ways we might not anticipate until decades later. The most terrestrial reptiles to claim the sea are also among its most misunderstood killers. To watch one knot itself into a reef crevice is to glimpse the improbable, a snake that swims like a fish, breathes like a mammal, and wields venom like a surgeon's scalpel. Yet its fate is tied less to the precision of its biology than to the blunt force of our fisheries and the blind spots of our medicine. The ocean does not exaggerate, it simply reveals. In the story of the sea snake, it reveals how power and vulnerability, lethality and fragility can coil together in one striped body, rising for air under the same sun that warms us. On a Caribbean reef, sunlight filters through turquoise water, scattering into ribbons that dance across coral heads. The scene feels idyllic, a living cathedral of color and motion. And then, like a blossom unfurling in slow motion, a fan of crimson and white spines expands. The lionfish hangs motionless, fins spread wide, its delicate stripes glowing in the light. To divers, it is one of the most photogenic fish in the ocean, a living tapestry that looks more like a work of art than a predator. But to the juvenile fish hovering nearby, those stripes are not decoration. They are the walls of an invisible trap. Within moments, the lionfish flares its pectoral fins, corralling its prey into a shrinking corral, until the only exit is through the predator's mouth. Beauty here is a weapon. The lionfish belongs to the genus Pterois, a group of venomous reef fishes native to the Indo-Pacific. In their home range, they are balanced players in a crowded ecosystem, hunted by larger predators and constrained by the natural checks of evolution. But in the Western Atlantic and Caribbean, where they now flourish as invaders, they are a disaster unfolding in slow motion. Their expansion is not powered by speed or size. They are relatively slow swimmers and rarely exceed half a meter in length. Their strength lies in two paradoxical qualities: defense and deception. Defense comes first. Along the lionfish's dorsal ridge, spines rise like a crown of needles, each tipped with venom glands. When threatened, the fish arches its back and flares its fins, transforming from a delicate ribbon of stripes into a fortress bristling with spears. The venom is not designed to kill large predators outright, but it inflicts excruciating pain and swelling, enough to deter most would-be attackers. Few predators in the Atlantic have any instinct to handle such defenses, which makes the invader even more secure in its adopted home. Divers who have brushed against these spines describe the agony as worse than jellyfish stings or even broken bones. For lionfish, the pain buys time to escape, time to keep hunting without fear of interruption. But offense is equally refined. Lionfish are one of the few reef predators that use their fins as tools of manipulation. When hunting, they spread their broad, fan-like pectorals, herding small fish and crustaceans against coral or into open water dead ends. By creating an artificial boundary, they erase the prey's escape routes. Then, in a sudden lunge, they strike with a gulp of negative pressure, swallowing victims whole. Studies of lionfish hunting behavior reveal success rates that dwarf those of many other reef predators. Part of this advantage comes from novelty. Atlantic prey species, having evolved without lionfish, fail to recognize the striped predator as a threat until it is too late. The origin story of the invasion reads like a cautionary tale of human negligence. In the late 20th century, lionfish entered the American aquarium trade, prized for their dramatic appearance. But beauty comes with responsibility, and not all owners were prepared to care for venomous carnivorous fish. Whether by accident during hurricane damage or by deliberate release from overwhelmed aquarists, lionfish entered coastal waters off Florida. With no natural predators, high reproductive output, a single female can release up to 2 million eggs in a year, and a tolerance for a wide range of habitats, they spread with alarming speed. By the early 2000s, lionfish were documented throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. Today they are found as far north as Rhode Island and as far south as Brazil. The ecological consequences are stark. Case studies in Bahamian reefs show that lionfish predation can reduce native reef fish recruitment by nearly 90% in heavily invaded areas. Juvenile parrotfish, wrasses and damselfish, critical grazers that keep algae from smothering corals, are particularly vulnerable. Without them, algae can overgrow reef surfaces, choking corals and diminishing biodiversity. What begins as a handful of exotic fish in the water column cascades into reef collapse, with long-term impacts on fisheries, tourism, and coastal protection. The irony is sharp. The very fish that divers once cherished for its beauty has become the face of reef decline. Its stripes, once admired as natural artistry, now serve as warning signs of imbalance. To some, lionfish are the poster child of invasive species, a reminder that introductions of non-native predators can ripple outward in ways we cannot predict or easily control. Efforts to contain the invasion have sparked both scientific innovation and cultural adaptation. Organized culls, spearfishing tournaments where divers compete to harvest as many lionfish as possible, have become common in parts of the Caribbean. These events temporarily reduce local populations and, more importantly, raise awareness. Yet studies reveal that unless culling is sustained and widespread, populations rebound quickly. The species' prolific reproduction and wide dispersal through pelagic larvae make eradication virtually impossible. Markets have emerged as a pragmatic solution. Lionfish flesh is firm, white and delicate, comparable to snapper. In some coastal towns, restaurants now feature lionfish tacos or ceviche, turning a problem into an opportunity. Jewelry makers use the spines in earrings and pendants, adding economic incentive to collection. The hope is that by creating consistent demand, communities will maintain pressure on populations. But challenges remain. Supply is irregular, handling requires training to avoid envenomation, and many consumers are wary of a fish they associate with venom rather than cuisine. The debate touches on broader questions of responsibility. If humans created the invasion, are we also obligated to contain it? And if so, how? Lionfish do not know they are in the wrong ocean. They are simply executing the evolutionary script they were given: reproduce, expand, and consume. The burden falls on us, both for having released them and for the choices we make now. The answer for many lies not in eradication, which is unattainable, but in coexistence with control. Sustained culling, education, and market integration can blunt the worst ecological impacts, even if they cannot restore the reefs to pre-invasion states. Still, the larger truth persists. Beauty can be deceiving. The lionfish dazzles with its fans of spines and painterly stripes, but beneath that allure lies an arsenal. Venom for defense, fins for offense, reproduction for invasion. It is a reminder that evolution does not design for aesthetics. It designs for survival. Our fascination with the lionfish's beauty blinded us to the consequences of its release, and our ecosystems now bear the cost. As the sun dips lower and the reef shifts into evening hues, the lionfish remains on patrol. Another fan of spines blooms. Another school of juveniles presses against an invisible wall. For them, beauty is not decoration, but danger. And for us, the lesson is unavoidable. The most photogenic reef fish of all has become a slow-motion disaster, one written not by nature alone, but by our own hand. In shallow tropical waters, where sunlight turns the seafloor into a tapestry of shifting gold and blue, a small, unremarkable fish hovers near a coral outcrop. It drifts lazily, as if uninterested in the bustle around it, the parrotfish scraping algae, the wrasses darting for plankton, the moray eel sliding back into its hole. And then, in a flash of panic, the little fish transforms. Its body balloons into a sphere, spines bristling outward, eyes bulging like glass marbles. The predator that lunged a heartbeat before now hesitates. What was once bite-sized has become impossible, a cartoon turned lethal. For the pufferfish, survival often depends on this one improbable trick, becoming larger, stranger, and more dangerous than it appeared only seconds before. The puffer's defense is not merely its ability to inflate. Beneath the comical shape lies chemistry of the deadliest kind. Most pufferfish carry tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin more powerful than cyanide. Its origin lies not in the fish itself, but in the bacteria that colonize its skin, liver, and reproductive organs. Over evolutionary time, the fish became host to these microbes, sequestering their toxin as both a defense and a deterrent. The mechanism is as elegant as it is deadly. Tetrodotoxin blocks sodium channels in nerve cells, halting the electrical impulses that allow muscles to contract. A predator that takes a careless bite finds itself paralyzed within minutes, the heart silenced, the diaphragm locked. A few milligrams are sufficient to end a human life. The fish does not need to advertise with warning colors, though some do, because the lesson spreads quickly among survivors. To swallow a puffer is to gamble with death. But inflation is the more theatrical line of defense, and its mechanics are remarkable. Unlike most fish, puffers lack rigid ribs. This anatomical absence allows their bodies to expand like balloons. When threatened, they gulp water, or, if at the surface, air, into a specialized elastic stomach, swelling to many times their original size. At the same time, spines that normally lie flat along their skin erect outward, transforming a soft-bodied fish into a floating mace. The physics are unforgiving for predators. Most gape-limited hunters, from groupers to reef sharks, calculate prey size based on mouth width. When a puffer inflates, it exceeds those limits, turning from easy target to impossible burden in the blink of an eye. Many predators, once fooled, release the fish before swallowing. For those that persist, the spines and toxins deliver a final punishing lesson. Yet to frame the puffer only as a comical balloon hides its other, more astonishing face, that of an architect. In the sandy shallows of Japan's southern islands, male white-spotted pufferfish engage in one of the most extraordinary mating rituals in the animal kingdom. Using only their fins, they carve enormous circular patterns into the seafloor, intricate mandalas nearly 2 meters across. The design is not random. Radiating ridges and valleys channel currents in precise ways, sorting coarse and fine sand into contrasting bands. Shell fragments are placed deliberately along the edges, adding decoration that catches light. At the center, a depression forms a calm zone, sheltered from turbulence, where eggs can be laid safely. Hydrodynamics lies at the heart of this behavior. The ridges amplify small currents, creating flow that carries larger particles outward while drawing fine grains inward. The result is both beautiful and functional, a circular structure that reduces drag, stabilizes the nest, and ensures oxygenated water passes gently over developing embryos. To the human eye, it resembles sacred geometry, a sand mandala traced by instinct rather than intention. To a female puffer, it is irresistible proof of a mate's fitness. Only the strongest, most skilled males can sculpt such elaborate arenas in the shifting sands, and only those males pass their genes forward. The juxtaposition is striking. One moment, the puffer is a bumbling sphere, inflating like a child's toy. The next, it is a master engineer, shaping landscapes at a scale that rivals its own body size many times over. Few animals embody such duality, absurd defense on one side, breathtaking construction on the other. Both strategies, however, are linked by the same principle: survival through improbable innovation. But the story of the puffer is not contained only in reefs and sandy shallows. It extends into kitchens, markets, and black markets, where its toxin and flesh have become part of human culture. In Japan, the dish known as fugu, prepared from pufferfish, is both delicacy and gamble. Highly trained chefs spend years mastering the art of removing toxic organs while preserving the edible flesh. Diners seek the thrill of danger, the subtle numbness of the lips that signals just enough toxin remains to taste without harm. Yet accidents occur. Each year, hospital reports detail poisoning, some fatal, from improperly prepared fish. The cultural reverence for fugu has elevated the puffer into myth, where death and delicacy share the same plate. Elsewhere, the fish enters darker channels. In some regions, poachers harvest puffer for illicit trade, selling dried organs on black markets where tetrodotoxin is valued as a weapon or a component of dubious traditional medicine. In rare but chilling cases, the toxin has been linked to intentional poisonings. Unlike other marine venoms, which break down quickly, tetrodotoxin is stable, persistent, and difficult to detect in small doses. For communities dependent on small-scale fisheries, this shadow economy adds risk to an already fragile relationship with the sea. Ecologically, puffers play complex roles. They are omnivorous foragers, feeding on algae, mollusks, and crustaceans. Their strong beak-like teeth allow them to crush shells and corals, shaping reef microhabitats in subtle ways. By grazing, they prevent algal overgrowth, but when populations surge, they can also damage reef frameworks. In some regions, overfishing of larger predators has allowed puffer numbers to rise unnaturally, compounding stress on coral systems. Thus, even beyond their toxins, they influence ecosystem health in ways both constructive and destructive. The pufferfish, then, is a study in contradictions. Cute in shape, yet lethal in chemistry. Clumsy in motion, yet capable of precision architecture. Reviled as dangerous in some places, revered as delicacy in others. In every aspect, it resists simple categorization. What binds these contradictions is evolution's indifference to beauty or humor. Inflation, toxin, and sand mandalas all exist because they work, because they let the fish survive and reproduce in an ocean that punishes the ordinary. Back on the reef, the inflated puffer slowly deflates, water expelled as it returns to normal size. Its spines fold back, and once again it looks small, almost fragile. But in the sandy shallows nearby, another member of its kin fans its fins, sculpting a circle that gleams like a mandala beneath the morning sun. Two sides of the same story: survival through spectacle, danger through design. For us, the lesson is clear. Never mistake charm for safety, and never assume that beauty cannot hide lethality. The pufferfish is both cartoon and chemist, architect and assassin. It inflates to terrify, poisons to defend, and builds to seduce. Evolution has given it not one path to survival, but many, each as unlikely as the last. And in its contradictions, it reminds us of the ocean's greatest truth, that the strangest designs are often the ones that work best. On a rocky ledge beneath the surge of cold Pacific water, a palm-sized creature hunkers down. At first glance, it seems little more than a living pincushion, a globe of spines, motionless except for the faint ripple of tube feet gripping stone. But lean closer, and the stillness dissolves into motion. At its base, nestled within the shell, a complex jaw apparatus works relentlessly. 5 calcareous teeth grind in slow unison, scraping at encrusting algae, biting into kelp holdfasts, rasping rock itself into powder. This is Aristotle's lantern, a feeding machine so precisely engineered that even 2,000 years ago, the philosopher marveled at its design. Magnified, it looks alien, teeth that never stop growing, jaws that never stop chewing. And as the camera pulls back, the scale of this hunger comes into view. What was once a dense underwater forest of kelp is now a moonscape, barren rock carpeted by hundreds of thousands of spines. Sea urchins, humble as they seem, are ecological gatekeepers. In balance, they are grazers that prune algae, keeping reef surfaces open for corals and kelp to anchor. But remove their predators, wrasses that nip at juveniles, lobsters that crush adults, sea otters that devour them whole, and their numbers surge unchecked. When this happens, coastlines unravel. Kelp forests, some of the most productive habitats on Earth, collapse under the relentless rasp of urchin mouthparts. What replaces them is not another lush ecosystem, but an empty expanse, the urchin barren. Kelp forests are often called the rainforests of the sea, towering canopies that rise from the seafloor to the surface, their fronds swaying in currents like trees in the wind. These forests capture carbon, buffer coasts against storm waves, and provide habitat for hundreds of species, from schooling fish to harbor seals. When sea urchins overgraze, they sever the very foundation of this habitat. Once a kelp holdfast is gnawed through, the entire plant detaches and drifts away, leaving bare substrate behind. With no canopy overhead, light penetrates to the rocks, but instead of sparking growth, it fuels the expansion of crustose algae and cyanobacteria. Surfaces too tough for most grazers to eat, too smooth for kelp spores to settle. The transformation is more than visual. Biodiversity plummets. Fish that relied on kelp structure for shelter disperse. Abalone and other mollusks deprived of food decline. Carbon sequestration capacity collapses as the photosynthetic canopy disappears. What remains is an ecological dead zone maintained by the very architects of collapse, urchins themselves. In many cases, these urchins enter a state biologists call zombie mode. With little fresh kelp left, they survive at minimal metabolic rates, their bodies gaunt, their gonads shrunken, yet their teeth never ceasing to scrape. They can persist for years like this, creating a feedback loop in which barrens remain barren, even without new growth to fuel them. The story of predator removal is key. In California, the near extirpation of sea otters during the fur trade of the 18th and 19th centuries triggered one of the earliest recorded collapses of kelp ecosystems. Without otters patrolling the beds, urchins multiplied, kelp forests disappeared, and entire fisheries declined. Only when otters began to recover under protection did kelp forests rebound in tandem. In the North Atlantic, the decline of cod and lobsters through overfishing has echoed the same pattern, with urchin populations surging where predators were lost. What begins as a missing link in the food web cascades into full-scale ecosystem collapse. Modern conservation offers both grim lessons and hopeful experiments. Divers surveying barrens in California or Tasmania describe the experience as walking through a graveyard. Fields of purple urchins covering rock, no canopy overhead, silence where once sea lions hunted among the fronds. Yet in regions where predators return, the recovery can be astonishingly swift. Studies in Alaska show that within a decade of sea otter reintroduction, kelp forests rebound dramatically. Juvenile fish recruitment surges, and the carbon-capturing machinery of the canopy roars back to life. The visual before and after is almost unbelievable. from grey rock to golden forest, from emptiness to abundance. Humans, inevitably, are part of the equation. Commercial fisheries target sea urchins for their roe, a delicacy in sushi markets known as uni. In principle, harvesting urchins can reduce grazing pressure and aid kelp recovery. In practice, it is complicated. Roe develops best in well-fed urchins from kelp-rich habitats, precisely the ones we do not want to deplete. Meanwhile, the zombie urchins that dominate barrens have little to no market value, their gonads shriveled. To address this, some entrepreneurs have turned to urchin ranching, collecting starved individuals from barrens and fattening them in controlled tanks on kelp or algae feed. Once restored, their roe can be harvested for profit, and their removal may give kelp spores a foothold again. This dark fix, turning ecological collapse into an economic opportunity, is not without controversy. Critics argue that it commodifies crisis, addressing symptoms rather than causes. Without predator recovery and fishing reforms, they warn, urchin ranching may only slow, not reverse, the spread of barrens. Proponents counter that in regions where otters or lobsters are unlikely to recover soon, ranching offers a pragmatic tool, aligning markets with conservation goals. At its best, it transforms pest into product, shifting incentives toward active stewardship of the seafloor. Behind the debate lies a deeper truth. Ecosystems are rarely undone by one force alone. Climate change intensifies the pressures. Marine heat waves weaken kelp beds, making them more vulnerable to grazing. Ocean acidification erodes the skeletons of predators like lobsters, diminishing their resilience against urchin booms. Pollution and sedimentation further stress coastal systems. In this matrix of pressures, the sea urchin is both culprit and symptom, a small grazer whose overabundance signals broader imbalance. The silence of the barren seafloor is deceptive. Urchins themselves are not silent. Their lanterns rasp continuously. Their spines clatter faintly when currents stir. But compared to the bustling soundscape of a kelp forest, with its snapping shrimp, croaking fish, and surging canopy, a barren is a void. The collapse is not an explosion, but a long, grinding erosion, one bite at a time. It is the kind of disaster easy to overlook because it unfolds quietly, without spectacle. And yet its impact reaches far. Carbon budgets disrupted, fisheries diminished, coasts less resilient to storms. In a world searching for ways to store carbon and stabilize coasts, kelp forests stand out as natural allies. Their decline under unchecked urchin grazing is a stark reminder of how fragile those alliances can be. And in every barren, the lesson is written plainly. A palm-sized grazer can flip entire coastlines when the first domino, predator removal, is tipped. The camera closes again on Aristotle's lantern, teeth grinding ceaselessly, a miniature machine repeating its work. Then it pulls back once more, showing the moonscape where a forest should be. The message is clear and sobering. Collapse does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, one scrape at a time, until the silence itself becomes the loudest signal of all. As twilight bleeds across the coast, the reef changes hands. Day-active fish retreat into crevices, their bodies pale with sleep, while the shadows come alive with a slower, heavier movement. Red antennae sweep the water like radar beams, probing ahead, left and right. From the darkness, the armored form of a lobster emerges. Its carapace gleams faintly under moonlight filtered through shallow water, claws tucked but ready, legs shifting with steady rhythm. The lobster is on patrol. For much of the day, it remains hidden beneath ledges and boulders, conserving energy and avoiding predators. But when night falls, the hunter becomes the janitor of the reef, roaming far in search of meals that others miss. Tonight, the target is a sea urchin. The spiny grazer clings to rock, slowly rasping algae with its lantern of teeth. But the lobster's antennae brush its spines, and in one practiced motion, the predator flips the urchin with a twist of its claws. Vulnerable underside exposed, the urchin has no defense left. The lobster cracks through with its crushing claw, shards of shells scattering like glass. One grazer removed means one less mouth grinding at kelp holdfasts. In this way, lobsters do not just feed themselves, they shape entire coastlines. Lobsters, belonging to the family Nephropidae, are far more than commodities for human markets. They are keystone predators in temperate ecosystems. By preying on sea urchins, they act as bulwarks against barren seafloors. In regions where lobster populations are healthy, kelp forests thrive. In regions where overfishing has reduced them, urchins often explode in number, erasing canopies and leaving only rubble. This dynamic is not hypothetical, but vividly documented. In parts of New England, the collapse of cod, another urchin predator, shifted control to lobsters, whose growing numbers helped suppress urchins and maintain kelp. But in areas where lobster fisheries intensified, the balance tipped again and barrens spread. A single claw cracking a single urchin may seem trivial, yet multiplied across generations, the action holds coastlines together. Their nightly patrols reveal an intelligence often underestimated in crustaceans. Lobsters use chemical signals in their urine to communicate dominance, territory, and readiness to mate. Encounters between rivals begin with antennae duels, but soon escalate to urine talk as jets are expelled toward each other. These chemical signatures allow lobsters to recognize previous opponents and remember the outcomes of past fights. Social hierarchies emerge, reducing the need for constant combat. For creatures encased in armor, these invisible dialogues keep the peace more effectively than claws ever could. Even more remarkable is their navigation. Lobsters migrate seasonally, moving from shallow coastal nurseries to deeper offshore grounds in long columns known as lobster highways. Tagging studies show they orient using the Earth's magnetic field, a form of internal compass that lets them retrace paths year after year with uncanny accuracy. The highways themselves become arteries of ecosystem exchange, shuttling nutrients and linking habitats separated by kilometers of open sea floor. Each antenna probe, each cautious step along the sand, is part of a larger choreography written into magnetic memory. Yet the lobster's story is not only one of ecological service. It is also entangled with our hunger, and here the narrative turns darker. Along coasts from Maine to Norway to Australia, lobsters are among the most valuable seafood commodities, driving entire fisheries. To catch them, fishers deploy baited traps or pots, designed to lure lobsters inside but make escape difficult. In regulated fisheries, these traps are retrieved regularly. But when storms sever lines or careless practices prevail, pots are lost. These ghost pots do not stop fishing. They continue to lure, trap, and kill for years. Inside a lost pot, the cycle is grim. A lobster enters drawn by scent. Once trapped, it dies of starvation or predation by others that follow. Its decaying body becomes new bait, attracting more victims. Fish, crabs, and even sea turtles can become ensnared, their carcasses renewing the cycle endlessly. Divers exploring heavily fished grounds have found entire graveyards of ghost pots, each one silently killing far beyond its intended purpose. In some regions, ghost fishing accounts for significant hidden mortality, undermining both conservation and the fishery's sustainability. Solutions exist, and they are striking in their simplicity. One is the use of rot cords, biodegradable twines attached to escape panels. Over months, these cords degrade, opening a pathway out of lost pots. Another is the adoption of vent rings sized to allow juveniles to escape while retaining only marketable adults. In areas where these measures have been enforced, ghost fishing declines dramatically. The challenge, as always, lies not in the technology, but in the will to enforce and adopt it. Fishermen, conservationists, and governments must align interests to prevent the silent attrition that ghost pots represent. The irony is sharp. The same species that safeguards kelp by night can contribute indirectly to kelp collapse by day through our exploitation of it. Remove too many lobsters and urchins overrun coastlines. Leave too many ghost pots and mortality outpaces reproduction. In each case, the domino effect is the same. Barrens spread, biodiversity wanes, and resilience falters. The lobster becomes villain not through its own behavior, but through ours. Still, there are stories of resilience. In protected marine reserves where lobster harvesting is restricted, populations rebound. With more lobsters cracking more urchins, kelp forests recover, fish assemblages diversify, and carbon sequestration increases. The contrast between protected and exploited zones is often visible even to snorkelers, lush forests swaying in one cove, empty rock in the next. The difference may hinge on something as simple as whether a claw is allowed to patrol freely. In the broader arc of evolution, lobsters embody endurance. They have walked the seafloor for hundreds of millions of years, surviving mass extinctions and climatic upheavals. Their armor and claws speak to a world where survival depends on both offense and defense, patience and aggression. Yet their survival now depends as much on our choices as on their own adaptations. Will we let them continue their nocturnal patrols, shaping ecosystems in balance? Or will our traps, forgotten and unchecked, turn guardians into casualties, heroes into unintended villains? The reef quiets again as dawn approaches. Lobsters retreat to their crevices, antennae folding back, claws tucked beneath armored chests. The urchins resume their grazing, safe until nightfall. But offshore, a different scene persists. Ghost pots on the seafloor, silently baiting, trapping, and killing. The contrast is haunting. In one cycle, lobsters maintain forests. In the other, our gear dismantles them. The lesson is not about lobsters alone, but about the fragile intersection of ecology and economy. Heroes at night can indeed become villains by day, not by choice, but by consequence of our designs. At the edge of dawn, the ocean seems almost still, its surface a mirror broken only by the slow swell of unseen giants below. Then the calm fractures. A misty column erupts skyward, tinged rust-red, drifting across the waves before collapsing back into the sea. To the unknowing observer, it might seem like little more than an odd discolored plume. But for the blue whale, Earth's largest animal, this act is one of planetary consequence. The plume is feces, iron-rich, nutrient-dense, and as it disperses through the water column, it fertilizes a layer of the ocean where light penetrates and phytoplankton wait. Days later, the patch of ocean glows greener, a bloom of microscopic life feeding krill, fish, and ultimately the whales themselves. A cycle begins anew, powered not only by the whale's appetite but also by its waste. This process, known to ecologists as the whale pump, transforms whales from mere consumers into ecosystem engineers. By diving deep to feed on krill and then returning to the surface to defecate, blue whales shuttle nutrients vertically through the water column. The iron in their feces is especially valuable in nutrient-poor waters, acting like fertilizer to stimulate plankton growth. Phytoplankton, in turn, capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen, linking the fate of the ocean's climate engine to the movements of these immense mammals. In a single year, one whale can recycle tons of nutrients, amplifying productivity far beyond its own needs. Scale this across populations, and the effect is staggering. Blue whales become not just predators of krill, but regulators of carbon and oxygen at a planetary scale. Yet the influence of a blue whale does not end with its life. When a whale dies, its body sinks to the abyss, becoming a phenomenon scientists call a whale fall. As the carcass drifts downward, it carries with it tons of carbon in the form of fat, protein, and bone. Upon reaching the seafloor, it becomes an island of life in a desert of darkness. Scavengers arrive first, sharks, hagfish, and deep-sea amphipods, stripping soft tissue within weeks. Then a slower succession unfolds. Bone-eating worms, bacteria, and mussels colonize the skeleton, breaking down lipids locked within bone marrow. Specialized communities flourish, some lasting decades, each phase of decomposition supporting organisms found nowhere else. In this way, even in death, the body of a blue whale sustains an entire world, distributing nutrients to ecosystems that might otherwise starve. The ecological role of whale falls has only recently been appreciated. In the pre-industrial ocean, when blue whales numbered in the hundreds of thousands, such events must have been common, providing a steady pulse of carbon to the deep sea. Industrial whaling not only removed living whales, but also silence this hidden subsidy, depriving abyssal ecosystems of nourishment for more than a century. Today, as populations slowly recover under protection, the promise of renewed whale falls hints at a restoration of these ancient nutrient highways. But for all their resilience over millions of years, blue whales now face dangers that evolution never prepared them for. One of the greatest is ship strikes. Modern shipping lanes overlap with migratory routes, and the scale is immense. Massive container vessels and oil tankers cut through the same waters that whales traverse in search of krill swarms. At dusk, under fading light, the contrast is stark. A blue whale surfacing to breathe moves with deliberate slowness, its immense body rising and falling in a rhythm that once went unchallenged. Bearing down from the horizon, a ship's bulbous bow slices the surface, its low-frequency engines thundering across the water. To the whale, the sound is not just noise, it is interference, masking the communication calls that guide its movements. Collisions are often fatal, leaving carcasses draped across bows or sinking unseen into the depths. Noise itself is another invisible threat. Blue whales rely on infrasonic calls, deep, low-frequency pulses that travel hundreds of kilometers to find mates and coordinate movements. These calls are among the loudest biological sounds on Earth, yet they now compete with the constant drone of ship engines, seismic surveys, and naval sonar. Imagine a vast ocean once filled with songs, now blurred into static. In places like the Indian Ocean, ambient noise levels have doubled or tripled in recent decades, shrinking the communication range of whales by more than half. The largest animals on the planet, dependent on voices carried across basins, find themselves silenced in their own habitat. Solutions exist, and they are often elegantly simple. In parts of California, shipping lanes have been rerouted just a few kilometers away from whale feeding grounds, reducing collisions dramatically. Voluntary speed restrictions have also proven effective. Ships traveling below 10 knots not only lower the risk of lethal strikes, but also reduce engine noise. Satellite tracking and acoustic monitoring now allow real-time detection of whale aggregations, enabling dynamic routing adjustments. These fixes are not costly compared to the scale of global shipping, yet adoption remains uneven, often hinging on political will and international cooperation. The contrast between threat and potential is profound. Here is an animal that grows longer than 3 city buses, weighs more than 100 tons, and feeds on krill smaller than a fingernail. Its heart is the size of a small car, its tongue outweighs an elephant, and yet its survival rests on delicate balances. The timing of krill blooms, the openness of migration corridors, the absence of noise interference. In its presence, the ocean is alive with power and grace. In its absence, entire nutrient cycles falter. To stand on the deck of a small vessel and watch a blue whale surface is to feel the scale of time itself. The exhalation is thunderous, the spout rising like a geyser. Barnacles fleck its skin, scars trace old encounters with propellers or rival whales. When it dives, the arch of the tail fluke seems to pull the horizon with it, vanishing into depths beyond sight. Yet for all this grandeur, the whale's most profound gift may be invisible. The invisible threads it spins between surface and seafloor, between atmosphere and ocean, between life and death. The largest predator on Earth is not just a hunter of krill, but a climate engine, a gardener of plankton, and a provider of deep-sea oases. Its story reveals how interwoven life truly is, how the act of defecation can fertilize ecosystems, how a carcass can feed communities for decades, how a single collision can silence more than 100 tons of living carbon. And in our highways across the sea, the whale meets its greatest trial, engines drowning out its voice, hulls cutting across its path. As dusk falls, the scene returns to where it began. A rust-red plume spreads across the waves, the quiet beginning of a bloom that will feed thousands. Days later, satellites will detect a greener patch, proof that even the waste of giants shapes the Earth. But as night deepens, the lights of a shipping lane glow on the horizon, a reminder that the fate of these giants is not theirs alone to decide. In saving whales, we do not just preserve spectacle. We preserve engines of climate, architects of ecosystems, and bridges of carbon between worlds. Sunlight pours down on a coral reef, splintering into beams that ripple across branching corals, sponges, and the flickering silhouettes of reef fish. Near the base of a large anemone, a flash of orange and white darts between tentacles. The scene is familiar to millions, immortalized in animation, a symbol of innocence and harmony. But beneath the charm lies a harsher truth. What looks like a cozy family home, a clownfish nestled in a bed of stinging tentacles, is in reality a strict hierarchical monarchy, where power is enforced by biology and survival is shaped as much by cooperation as by coercion. The first puzzle is how the clownfish survives among tentacles lined with nematocysts, the stinging cells of the anemone. For nearly every other fish, a brush against those tentacles triggers venom-laced harpoons that pierce skin, immobilizing prey or burning intruders. Yet the clownfish swims freely, rubbing against the tentacles as though they were nothing more than flowing kelp. The secret is mucus. Over evolutionary time, clownfish developed a specialized mucus coating enriched with sugars and proteins that prevent nematocyst discharge. In some cases, the fish acclimates to its anemone by gradually brushing against the tentacles, building up immunity as it acquires the anemone's own chemical cues. What seems miraculous is simply chemistry. The anemone fails to recognize its partner as foreign, sparing it while stinging nearly everything else. This immunity allows for a partnership that reshapes the micro-ecosystem. The clownfish gains refuge, a living fortress that wards off predators. In return, the anemone gains both cleaning and fertilization. Clownfish waste, rich in nitrogen, boosts the growth of its host. Studies have shown that anemones with resident clownfish grow significantly faster than those without. In effect, the fish fertilizes its own protector, reinforcing the alliance through nutrient cycling. The fish also defends its anemone aggressively, charging at butterfly fish that attempt to nip at tentacles, or nipping the fins of intruders that come too close. It is an arrangement with echoes of farming. The anemone provides shelter, the clownfish provides nutrients and defense. Each reinforces the other's survival, a miniature economy embedded in coral reef society. But within the clownfish colony itself, harmony dissolves. Unlike many reef fish that form shoals of equals, clownfish live in rigid hierarchies. At the top of each anemone's community is a single dominant female, the largest fish in the group. Below her is a smaller breeding male, her mate. Beneath them are layers of non-breeding subordinates, each ranked strictly by size. The order is enforced ruthlessly. If a subordinate grows too quickly, it risks aggression from those above. The result is stunted growth. Subordinates are effectively starved into compliance, their size suppressed by both lack of access to food and the constant psychological stress of domination. This system is not merely social convention, but reproductive strategy. Clownfish are protandrous hermaphrodites. All begin life as males. If the dominant female dies, the breeding male undergoes sex reversal and becomes female. The largest subordinate then rises to take his place as breeding male. In this way, the lineage is preserved without conflict. The structure is efficient but unforgiving. Advancement requires either the death or expulsion of those above. For all its cuteness, the family of clownfish is closer to a monarchy than a cooperative. Power flows downward and subordinates live in enforced restraint. The consequences of this hierarchy play out daily on the reef. A dominant female may bully subordinates away from food, ensuring her own size advantage remains unchallenged. Subordinates, meanwhile, linger at the margins, dashing out to snatch scraps of plankton or algae while avoiding the wrath of their superiors. What looks to us like play, a dart, a chase, a nip, is in reality a constant assertion of rank. Survival within the tentacles requires obedience as much as symbiosis. Beyond their biology, clownfish and anemones are entangled with us in complicated ways. The popularity of aquarium fish keeping, amplified by cultural phenomena like films, has driven intense demand for clownfish in the pet trade. In many regions, this demand was historically met by wild collection. Divers harvested both fish and their anemones, depleting local populations and disrupting reef balance. Unlike schooling fish that scatter across reefs, clownfish are tied to their anemones, making them easy targets for collection. In heavily harvested regions, entire stretches of reef lost their anemone hotels, depriving clownfish of refuge and reproduction sites. The problem intersects with another human-driven stress: bleaching. Anemones, like corals, depend on symbiotic algae for energy. Rising sea temperatures cause them to expel these algae, turning pale and weakened. Bleached anemones shrink, their tentacles retracting, leaving less habitat for clownfish. In places like the Great Barrier Reef, surveys reveal declines in clownfish populations closely tied to bleaching events. Where the hotels vanish, the tenants vanish with them. There is hope, however, in captive breeding. Unlike many reef fish with complex larval stages, clownfish can be bred in captivity relatively easily. Hatcheries now supply global aquarium markets with captive-bred individuals, reducing pressure on wild populations. These fish are often healthier, adapted to aquarium conditions, and free from the parasites or pathogens of the wild. Captive breeding cannot solve bleaching, but it can sever the link between human desire and reef depletion. It is one of the rare cases where aquarium culture, often maligned, may contribute to conservation by shifting demand away from fragile ecosystems. Yet even here, the hierarchy remains. In tanks, as in reefs, clownfish enforce size-based domination. Owners may observe what they interpret as affection between pairs, but the reality is control. The largest fish becomes female, the next male, and the rest remain suppressed. In captivity, as in the wild, the monarchy persists. What we call cute is in fact a dictatorship scaled down to a few liters of water. The irony is profound. The internet's most beloved reef mascot, celebrated as a symbol of innocence, is in truth the enforcer of one of the strictest hierarchies in the ocean. Its survival depends on both immunity to stings and enforcement of rank. It fertilizes its host while starving its siblings. It plays guardian while suppressing rivals. And all of this unfolds in the narrow space of an anemone's tentacles, a tiny kingdom where monarchy reigns supreme. As the reef scene closes, a clownfish rubs gently against its host, reinforcing its chemical shield. To us, it looks like cuddling. Then, in the same moment, it darts and nips at a smaller sibling, driving it away from food. The anemone sways, indifferent. The partnership remains intact, but within the tentacles, order is never in question. The lesson is subtle but clear. Even the ocean's cutest partnerships can hide rigid hierarchies. What looks like harmony is often power, and what looks like family is in truth a pretty dictatorship.